Is having racial preferences in dating racist, and why? Once had a date with a girl named Mao. I'm Mexican, she is Korean. After the date her brothers saw me and the next day her family made it clear I am not to be dating her. I asked out another girl, she used her dad as an excuse to turn me down. My dad doesn't like Mexicans. It was okay if turn was true or not, just say you're not interested. I told her I'm not interested in dating your dad. Edited, so many errors. I'm sorry this happened to you. But the not interested in dating your dad is pretty funny. My dad always said he supported us dating who we wanted, because you're sleeping with them, not me. My family has always been more concerned with the heart and mentality of a person than anything else. Aside from serious circumstances, it weirds me out that parents want to control this aspect of their kids' lives to this extent. I don't think that preferences have to be racist, but they're often expressed in that way. I'll use two common examples. Fetishization. You know those girls who are really into pop and fetishizing Asian men? Who will try to date or even harass Asian men simply for being Asian. Not even caring about who these people are. Not wanting to get to know them. Just wanting their Asian boyfriend. Racist as fuck. Disrespecting people you're not attracted to. There are too many people who think it's okay to be an asshole to people they don't wanna fuck, just because they have nothing to gain from being nice to them. So if you're disrespecting, let's say a black person, because you don't want to fuck them anyway, guess what? Racist as fuck. Fetishization. God, you don't know how annoying it is when people do that. I'm short and I'm an Asian girl. I once met a pair of European women whispering about me behind my back. I distinctively remember them saying how cute and quaint I am, especially since I like wearing big baggy clothes. Bish, I ain't some cottage in the woods you're observing. If you want to talk about me, then tell it to my face. I've always been interested in discussing this as a POC. To be honest, I'm genuinely curious as to why we are allowed to exercise that sort of criteria in romantic relationships, but in every other context, it's discriminatory. For example, you're a white business owner. You only hire white people because you're more comfortable around them. But why is that? Just because you haven't worked out or broken down why you prefer to be around a certain race doesn't mean it isn't a discriminatory sentiment. What's the explanation there? Well, one situation is about work and the other is about romance. There's a difference. But is there? In both situations you're jumping to conclusions about someone of a certain race. I would love to hear any other reasoning for not wanting to date someone of a certain race other than having preconceived notions about who they are, what their values or principles are, what they look like. Especially since there's such a wide spectrum of what people look like regardless of race, and whether you're assuming that you'll be romantically incompatible with someone based solely on their race and skin color. There are plenty of people who say it's my preference when it's actually what will people think of me if they see me with someone like that? Just because they haven't verbalized it or said it out loud or have no interest in exploring why they have that preference doesn't mean it's not racist at its core. I've yet to hear a good reason other than it's just a preference. All discrimination is technically just a preference of one race over another. Maybe I'm just fortunate enough to not have a preference myself, but I'm sorry. You tell me you'd prefer to date someone of your own race, or you say you won't date someone of a certain race and won't consider anything else, I'm going to question your motivation for having that preference. No, because everyone has preferences that are personal to them in dating, including but not limited to race. If anything, how we express the preferences in conversation is racist, but not the preferences themselves. A preference is defined as a greater liking for one alternative over another or others, and not a disliking for one alternative over another or others, which is a common misconception. Exactly this. Everyone has a level of attraction, but when it becomes ingrained enough to be a preference you have to talk about, I do think it's racist. I'm not always attracted to blue eyes. What I mean, there's a lot of white men with brown eyes, so saying that I'm not attracted to white men is both racist and inaccurate. I could use racial preference to say I don't like white men, and that's just my preference. But I could also say that I'm really attracted to a certain feature, and I don't think that would be racist. I see women constantly adding things like "don't even bother if you're not one M80" and Tinder. If that's okay, then doing the same with race should be okay as well. My opinion being the opposite. BTW, both should not be said. Don't add such things, just don't like the person and nobody needs to be offended. But for the record, the answer is unequivocally not racist. In fact, it's funny. Sometimes companies get so woke that they lose sight of who they're hurting. Grindr, gay hookup, dating app, remove the racial filters from their apps, and as a black person who prefers other black guys, it pissed me off. Of course Grindr pretended they were protecting us, like, I wanna hook up with who I wanna hook up with, and besides if some white dude isn't into me then why do I care if he can see me on the grid? Yes and no, everyone has their preferences, but when a person says, "Oh, I want an Asian woman because they're innocent and submissive. I want a spicy Latina to scream at me. They must be good in bed. Black girls aren't my type because they're loud, ugly and ghetto. I won't date a Mexican man because he's probably after me for papers or something. Black men are thugs and will probably turn me ghetto." Those are major red flags in my opinion, because if you're dating or not dating that specific race due to stereotypes including the model minority myth, which does nothing but influence people with fetishes and shit and keeps POC within the assigned ranks of these racial classes. In other words, it's generalizing an entire race, which is racist. But then again, if your preference is Latino men because you see a certain beauty in them that no one else sees or you can somehow relate to them in a sense, then you do. Personally speaking, I am Afro-Jamaican, but I'd prefer dating people who are Irish, Chinese or Korean because it's the culture I'm most familiar with. I could have worded this better, excuse my English. You don't have to be attracted to someone to give them the same respect and decency owed any human being. With that said, fetishizing races can be racist. For example, Black.com, NSFW. The exclusive fetishization of black men on white women is fueled by interracial taboo. Therefore the fetish is only a fetish of the because subconsciously, one feels that interracial sex is wrong. This is inherently different from simply watching an attractive white person coincidentally having sex with an attractive black person. I'm late but I'll answer anyway. Yes and number, depends on the reason. If you're turning a race into a fetish like people do to black men and Asian women, then yeah, that's kinda racist or at least fucked up. If you have no interest in dating someone because of their race, that is racist. I know black women who wouldn't date white men because they are white but don't say that explicitly. They will say they are all soft or won't understand them. That is a generalized opinion and not okay. However, not technically racist, if your reason for the lack of interest has to do with their race or going down a slippery slope. It's never wrong to be attracted to physical characteristics or cultural aspects that may be related to a specific race. You can't force attraction. I think it becomes racist when people make wrong generalizations, like some guys who say they like Asian women, usually only refer to East Asian features. You can't really state just one general Asian look. An Indian woman looks entirely different from a Chinese or Filipino woman. There are also some racist assumptions like, "Oh, I wanna marry a Filipina so she can take care of me in the house." These guys expect us to be their caregivers and maids. I think it depends on reason and how strongly you hold on to those preferences. I'll use myself as an example. I am black and I have a racial preference of anyone who isn't of my own race. My reasoning that I've been black nearly my whole life and I like to know how the world is for someone who isn't black. Now, if a black woman was to ask me out, there is a very good chance I would say yes. There's a pretty good chance I would ask a black woman out myself. It's not preferred, but that's life. Now if I was like, "No, I don't want to date a black woman, they all act ghetto and are too loud," they would be racist. If I like all other aspects of a person, but they're just the wrong shade of brown, that would be racist. I have never dated a person of underscore ethnicity equals not racist. I would never date a person of underscore ethnicity equals probably racist. People of underscore ethnicity all have, do, are underscore, and because of that I would never date one equals super fucking racist. As soon as you start using generalizations and anecdote based on race to inform your opinions on people before encountering them, that's where it becomes racist. I've never dated a South Asian person, but just because it hasn't happened in the 40 years I've been alive doesn't mean I think it can't happen. This is the take I agree with the most. The bit that I would add is that pretty much everything that exists only in people's heads, such as racist inclinations, is a sliding scale. There also exists a threshold where the amount of racism becomes a problem. If someone's only racist tendency affects nothing but who they want to date, then that hasn't passed the threshold and isn't a problem because no one's obligated to want to date other people. But brains also don't work with neat little binaries and compartments, so it's unlikely that someone would be racist in 100% only that way. I prefer white guys for dating since they tend to be more attracted. It's normal to notice patterns in what you find attractive. This doesn't mean I dislike men that don't fit into my idea of attractiveness or that I wouldn't find any men of color in the world attractive. My current partner prefers short, thin women. It wouldn't be body shaming for him to not be into taller or bigger women. What is a preference? Racist people try to hide behind preferences to excuse their racism. In reality though, a preference doesn't mean I am incapable of finding X attractive, only capable of finding X attractive. It's when I walk into a room of strangers, I'll notice X first. Healthy individuals date people who don't fit parts of their preferences all the time, because they are dating whole people. Setting aside that where you live can affect the kind of people you meet, no, having racial preferences is the same as saying you enjoy different skin tones, hair color, or eye color. When I see this topic brought up though, it tends to not truly be a preference, but racism eroding as a preference. That's your residual preference. You are attracted to the female sex. Trans people are always talking about how sex and gender are different. And yet I've seen so many posts calling lesbians transphobic TERFs when they don't want to suck some empty girl dick. I've also seen posts where gay men are being shat on for not being attracted to FTM. Now sex and gender are suddenly the same. Newsflash. Lesbians like pussy and gays like dick. Trying to force them to accept the opposite is in my opinion pretty homophobic and similar to going back to conversion therapy. Same with forcing a straight to be with someone of their same sex. No matter what their presenting gender is, your sexual orientation is based on sex, and people can't help what sex they're attracted to. So, no, there's nothing wrong with your opinion and I know most people agree with you. In a way kinda most of the time unintentionally. I personally have never understood racial preferences because there are so many different shapes, sizes, shades, hair types, facial structures, backgrounds, mindsets, etc. in each race that it just doesn't make sense to put one over the other. I can understand maybe leaning more towards your own race due to you probably growing up around people of that race and more familiar with them overall in comparison to others, but putting one race over the other in general is just closed-minded. An example would be those videos where they rank random people off of attractiveness. If they put an Asian girl, black girl, white girl, and Hispanic girl in one room and told me to rank them in order of attractiveness, I'd rank them one way, but if I were to rank another set of women that follow the same racial theme, my ranking will more than likely be completely different because they'd be completely different individuals. To sum it all up, race just shouldn't matter when it comes to physical attraction because race is too vast of a category. It should be based on the individual. Edit. I'm black, and even though I may have a slight preference for my own race based on other factors, I find women of all races equally attractive. I've met women of all different races that I'd consider to be beautiful, so I can't put one over the other. No, the absence of a positive prejudice is not the same thing as the presence of a negative one. Unless you're remarkably open-minded, there is certainly a very wide selection of people to whom you aren't attracted. irrespective of race. Also, when you consider the wide variety of slave owners who fathered children on their chattel, racism and physical attraction aren't mutually exclusive. One might even suggest they're completely orthogonal. This question is a classic example of what's gone wrong in society today. Instead of applying any rational or critical thought to something, it's a case of just having a knee-jerk reaction. You prefer to date, insert race, guys, girls, racist. Now come on, please. Just think for a minute. Is a dating preference really prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism by an individual against a person or people on the basis of their membership of a particular racial or ethnic group? Is a person who wants to date a particular race because of attraction, interest of whatever really saying that, by extension, one race is superior to another? In the overwhelming majority of cases they're really not. Okay, a racial dating preference can stem from racism, but not all racial dating preferences are racist. It's important to keep that in mind. No, and it should never be looked at that way, ever. You are attracted to who you are attracted to. I'm not going to say that we who have specific preference haven't encountered a few outliers ... but we like what we like. It doesn't mean we hate or look down at people of our not preferred race to date ... It just means we aren't attracted. It's not considered a problem if I'm straight and not attracted to women. It's not a problem if I like a certain body weight, size or any unique characteristic, so race shouldn't be exempt. Everyone has preferences, it's not a big deal. The only time it could be considered racist is if you refuse to date someone based on their race. I'd never date a black man, or only date someone of a specific race due to fetishism. I won't date a woman who isn't Asian. They're so much more docile and feminine than other women. I am aware Asian is not really a race, as Asia covers a very large area full of many different races and ethnicities. I was quoting something someone actually said to me once without a hint of irony. Yes, and number. I think that if said preferences are expressed in a derogatory way, then they are. I also think it can be racist, bigoted, to say I only date this race because, like me for instance, I'm a white guy who prefers to date black women. This does not mean, however, that I won't date any other race. It's just a preference, not at all a requirement. As far as people who refuse to date anyone outside of their race, I don't think it's inherently racist, but it is very closed-minded and ignorant in my opinion. Having a preference is not racist. Stating the preference, by diminishing another preference, is, for both the anti and fetish people. You can state your preference without tearing someone else down. Just state your preference of what you're into. However, on stating your preference, be aware that tokenism often comes across as creepy by the way it is communicated to the other. Like, are you dating a person or trying to date a race? P.S. Backhanded compliments are in fact not compliments. You're pretty for a black girl. I usually don't date blacks, but you're the exception. I like my woman small and demure, hence why I like Asian women and don't date blacks. I love black women, because they're so bossy. I would never date a ginger. Can you imagine our children? He's ginger, but he is hot, you know, one of those rare ginger hotties. Not necessarily, but ... When a society has racial winners and losers, I think it's worthwhile to examine and reflect on any and every kind of bias for or against particular races. Think about where this preference might be coming from, and what has or hasn't influenced it. Consider how many people of X race you've really interacted with before. You may find that your preferences remain exactly the same after you examine them more closely, and that's fine. But we rarely harm anything by a bit of self-reflection. There's preferences and then there's just tell never date an X person. Why would you never? You mean you could strongly connect to someone but still just be like, ah yeah, shame your ex. And that's the only reason? That's just racist. There is no way you could have a reason for that that isn't racist. A preference usually doesn't mean exclusion, it just means you prefer one or more things over the others, and I think that's fine. There's also the essence of fetishization, which is certainly racist. I have racial preferences tbh. I am not very interested to date white guys because too many of them see me as their fetish since I am half Japanese. and I like black guys because I think they're the most handsome.